Good evening. I was waiting for some people that are still coming down the foyer, so there's plenty of seats in the back. They can have a seat. I'm Mrs. Coughlin. I'm the principal of Glenbard South High School, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight and to thank you for being here. Tonight's presentation, Heroin, Truths, and Facts, is so very important. And you took the time out of your busy schedule to be here, and that demonstrates to us that it's important for all of you. As a parent and as an educator, I recognize that with the temptation and availability comes along dangers and then consequences. So our presenters and special guests are here tonight to provide information and shed light on the troubling problem that's growing in our community. I'm very interested in learning what they have to share because from the parent perspective, I need to know how to help my child. I need to know what's happening. I need to know how it's happening, and I need to know what I can do to help them make good, safe decisions. Well, wearing my administrator hat, I also need to know the same question or same answers to those questions, but I also need to find out about some helpful resources for families and also to help students with continuing their educational opportunities should they fall down the wrong path. We are all in this together, and I'm so thankful that you're here tonight. I'm pleased that we have some top officials with us from DuPage County and Glen Ellen, and they're going to share, like I said, their expertise with us tonight. They'll be coming up on stage and speaking to you, but I would like to recognize them at this time. So if you would please stand when I introduce you. DuPage County Sheriff John Zaruba. Dr. Rich Jorgensen, DuPage County Coroner. Mr. Bob Berlin, State's Attorney. DuPage County Sergeant Randy Groh. Ms. Claire Dragovich, she's the director of the DuPage Crime Lab. Okay. We also have Glen Ellen Police Chief Phil Norton. And we have some special guests that are joining us tonight. Matt Lagona, okay, he's here. Don't put up. And he's going to share with us his personal journey and struggle with heroin addiction. Also joining us is Ms. Maselli. Ms. Maselli lost a child to heroin, and she is also the founder of the LTM Foundation, which is a parent support group. So we're very thankful for all of you being with us tonight. I cannot continue without sharing some special thanks to Mr. Taft Nielsen, our Glenbard South Assistant Principal for Student Services. You know, Mr. Nielsen has really spearheaded a lot of the work here in combination with the Sheriff's Office and a lot of details, you know, a lot of communication. And he will address what Glenbard District 87 is doing to be diligent and proactive in the investigations of heroin abuse and what's happening in our community and our schools. So tonight's format will go like this. Each person is going to share their information, and some of them have some websites that they're going to take you to so that you can, you know, connect with that information later, dig a little deeper. Then following the presentations, law enforcement personnel, they have tables out in the foyer with information, and they're there to answer any questions that you may have. If you picked up a note card that was on the table, you can jot down notes or jot down a question and ask them that following the presentation. So I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you for being here tonight, and I would like to welcome Sheriff Zaruba to the stage.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for coming and participating in this community forum concerning enormous rise in heroin and its effects on our children and our community. The trafficking and use of heroin in the Collier County surrounding Chicago has reached epidemic proportions. Communities around our nation are now reporting that heroin deaths have outnumbered homicides by 2 to 1. Last year in our community, DuPage County, we'd experienced 10 homicides and 46 heroin deaths, over 4 times the number of homicides. The old stereotypes of the addict in the back alleys shooting up with a syringe, a spoon, and a match on the west side of Chicago has added new clients. Our sons, our daughters, our relatives, and our friends who by chance or happenstance or by peer pressure or by pain relief are our community's newest victims of smoking a $10 hit of heroin. And just like the back alley addict, they don't wake up in the morning. Every one of us loses when this illegal narcotic takes over our children and our community. We are here to try to answer your questions. We are here to try to involve you in the solutions. And we are here together as a community to stop the needless deaths of our children and start the recovery process together. About 15 years ago, the American Medical Association began to promote pain as a vital sign, challenging medical practitioners to treat pain as they would any other vital sign, such as a high temperature and a rapid pulse. Prescription narcotic pain medication became the answer to the relief of that pain. And it worked so well for the right reasons, but it worked too well for the wrong reasons. Over the years, prescription painkillers were in almost everyone's medicine cabinet. They served their medical purposes, but it didn't take long for these illegally prescribed narcotics to be overused, to be abused, and be diverted to illegitimate users and traffickers. There was so much out there that it was cheap to buy and became a great source of income for the sellers. Now, the sellers, by the way, were not only the West Side gangbangers, they were the schoolmates and friends of the guy next door who raided mom or grandma's medicine cabinet, diverting the Vicodin, the hydrocodone, the naproxen, and the like for fast cash and a quick high to their consumers, which are our kids, taking a safe prescription drug for a quick thrill. But the community responded, as well as government and the physicians. Doctors tightened up their prescription practices of the prescribed narcotics and replaced them when it was medically feasible to non-narcotic pain relievers. Parents and grandparents locked up their medicine cabinets and began disposing of the unused prescriptions in their health department disposal centers. And federal, state, county, and local law enforcement officials became more efficient on controlling the illegal trafficking of prescription meds. That's the good news, but not really. Here's what really happened after that. Prices soared as supply of illegally diverted prescription meds dwindled. Demand became steadily rising, and the drug traders responded with a cheap and plentiful solution: heroin. Freshly imported from Mexico and Afghanistan through a network of cartels and street gangs, to the street corners on the far west side of Chicago, and to a very successful friends and family suburban network of salesmen selling directly to an abundance of unknowledgeable kids with cash looking for more for less, feeding and killing our most precious citizens, our children. Well, that's the MapQuest version of how we got here, so let me set the stage. Here are the hard facts. Prescription medication opens the door to heroin use. A single dose may cause addiction or death. Young adults and teens are the targets. And even after rehab treatments, addicts can never again use mood-altering chemicals like alcohol or any other drug. Heroin changes the function of the brain, and painful withdrawal may happen as soon as a few hours after last drug use. And not all marijuana users are heroin users. However, all heroin users use marijuana. And 50% of those who use heroin will die. Our first presenter is the DuPage County Coroner, Dr. Richard Jorgensen. He's the man who witnesses the harsh results of this senseless but preventable epidemic. Don't let there be one more victim. Dr. Jorgensen?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for all of you being here, and thank you to your school and your town and your interested officials, because this is a critically important topic. I put this picture up here on purpose because it is very uncomfortable. It is dirty. It is something that makes you feel like your skin is crawling, and that is what heroin addiction is about. I'm the DuPage County Coroner, and because of that, I deal with all of the deaths that occur in this county due to drug addictions, due to heroin addiction, and such. I'm also a medical doctor, and so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the medical aspects of what we're talking about tonight, and intro into the other criminality issues that we'd be talking about. So, heroin, the story with heroin starts with this beautiful flower. It's a poppy flower. It's a beautiful plant. We have the plant here in America, except it does not produce the amount of drug that the poppy plants from Afghanistan or Mexico cause. The flower turns into this pod, and this pod is scored, and this sap pours out of it. And thousands of years ago, people realized that this sap has the highest amount of morphine of any natural plant or product in the world, and that sap then is scraped off of there, and that tar or that collected thing has a morphine content of about 12% to 15%, and that's what we call opium. And the opium is then processed, and that processed material is processed into heroin. But the old-fashioned idea that came from when I was in high school, when I was in a building like this, is this black tar. And this black tar is the old type of heroin that was produced. It's very low content of heroin, and it had to be injected. So the typical thing that I have in my mind of a heroin addict is someone who's injecting this drug into their system and is a real down-and-out person in an alley. And that was the old picture. The new picture is because of this. We have the drug cartels and the people who are processing this drug are now processing it to very, very refined heroin. It's very pure, it's white, it's clean, and the important part of that is that you do not have to inject it anymore. It can be snorted, it can be smoked, so it can be ingested into the system without injecting it into your system. I've talked to many heroin addicts who have said, I've never injected heroin in my life. So that's because we have this really refined heroin. The other important aspect of this is that it's cheap and it's available. So in the Chicagoland area, we have highly refined, highly potent heroin like this that's available for $10 a bag. This is a key slide. You can see on this slide that there are all kinds of different street drugs on there. LSD, ecstasy, cannabis. They're all kind of in the middle. And then way in the upper corner, you see a drug that's hanging off the chart. And on the bottom, there's physical harm. And on the left-hand side, there's dependence. So the most dangerous drug to your body and the most addictive drug in the whole pantheon of illegal drugs is heroin. It is hanging off the chart, and that's why tonight we're talking about this drug in a specific way, not adding all these other drugs, not confusing the conversation. We're talking about heroin. So how does heroin work? So heroin has to get into the body. So it's either injected or it's smoked. Somehow it gets into the body. it has to, what I call, get in the door. It has to get into the brain. It has to cross the blood-brain barrier. It has to become what I call the golden goose. It has to break down to morphine. All of the drugs, whether it's Vicodin, OxyContin, any of these drugs, it has to break down to morphine in the brain. And then it has to get a good reception. It actually attaches to opiate receptors that are in the brain. The morphine molecule and the heroin molecule look almost identical. The only thing that heroin does is that it gets across the blood-brain barrier much quicker than morphine or these other drugs do. So that's what heroin does, that is different. It is quicker into the brain than anything else. And there it breaks down into morphine, and that's what then affects the brain. So how does it work in the brain? All of these arrows are pointing to a very central portion of the brain. And I just want to point out very quickly that we have receptors in our brain that are affected by what we call endorphins. And you've heard those before. You go out and you go on a 5-mile run and you get endorphins. And it makes you feel good because all of these things are things that make you heal, that you feel better. If you eat well, you have endorphins. All of these things are things that help our body and help us feel good and be rewarded. Well, all of the drugs that are addictive and all of these drugs that affect us attach to the same receptors that our natural body endorphins do. The only thing that they do is attach and stimulate it 10 times more. So these all affect these reward mechanisms. And I'm going to go through these quickly because these are a lot of scientific terms. But basically, in the brain there is dopamine, which is what stimulates us, which is what makes us want to do more, and then there's serotonin, which tells us that we're doing fine. All of these drugs make us have more dopamine, which makes us be more stimulated and more active, not the serotonin, which makes us be more satisfied. And most importantly, I'm just going to skip to this area called the locus ceruleus. And this is one of the most primitive areas in our brain. It's very, very deep in our brain. It's very central. And it's the area that if you are addicted to a drug or anything, it will stimulate you to do anything to get that drug. This is the area that makes you commit felonies, to go out and steal from your mom, steal from your friends, to be dishonest. And as a friend of mine who's a recovered heroin addict says, this is the area that steals your soul. This is what makes you not be a human being anymore. So what does heroin do to you? It is a stimulant of all of the areas in your brain and your body that make you feel comfortable, that make you feel happy. So a person who's on heroin or morphine or Vicodin or OxyContin is a person who's sleeping in the corner, who's very satisfied, very warm, not the person who's very stimulated and being obstruction to the police. It's not like PCP or cocaine or some of these other drugs. It makes you feel very comfortable. What is the long-term action of of heroin? Almost every addict to heroin will tell you that within 1, 2, 3, 4 times of taking heroin, you are mentally and physically addicted. And it certainly isn't any more than that. And some people say it's the first time, some people say it's the fourth time, but you become addicted. There are no occasional heroin users. You don't take heroin one weekend and then go away for a while and then take it a couple of weekends later. There are other drugs that you can do that. I don't want to confuse this conversation tonight with those things. When you're a heroin addict, you are addicted to heroin 24/7. Every day, you have to have that amount of drugs in your system or you're going to get sick. And it becomes a point where you are no longer getting high. You're no longer getting that high feeling that you're looking for. All you're doing is taking these drugs to keep you from being sick. And it is a lifestyle of addiction, addiction, addiction. There are only a few versions of this lifestyle. It is that you are either an active addict going out and getting your drugs every day. And to do that, you are probably spending a couple of $100 to $300 or $400 a day on these drugs. Most normal people don't have $300 or $400 a day to spend on a habit like this. So what do? You go to criminal activity. You become a felon. You go out and steal. You rob. You rob from your parents. You do whatever you can. So you end up in either as you're an active addict or because you've been caught doing a felony, you're in the criminal justice system. If you take too much of this drug, which is way too common, you end up in my office in the morgue. Or luckily you get the help that you need and you become a recovered addict. Those are the 4 pathways. There really aren't a lot of other choices for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the experience that we've had in DuPage County with heroin deaths. This is a chart of the years from 2007 to 2013. 2007, we had about 20-some heroin deaths a year. So that is about one every 2 weeks. As we went on to 2013, we had 46 heroin deaths in last year. And those, I'll show you a little statistics later, but that was an astonishing number. As you can see, it's going up and it's becoming very, very epidemic. 2012, not last year, the year before, we had 38 deaths that were purely attributed to heroin, mainly males, 30 to 8. And you can see we had one teenager, mostly 20-year-olds, then the next most number is 30-year-olds. Why is that? It's because, as I said, this isn't a long lifestyle. You are doing something that is causing you to spend hundreds of dollars a day. You're either in the criminal justice system or you end up overdosing and becoming ill and dying. The 49, 50 year, those ranges, those are almost all people that my group, doctors, have gotten addicted to opiates through pills. I'm not blaming the doctors. I'm just saying that is a pathway into that. And then those people become heroin addicts because they can't afford 100 Vicodin a day anymore. It's cheaper to go out and get the heroin. And it's really counterintuitive, but that's what happens. So these are the towns that people lived in that died in 2012. I don't put this up here to pimp any town. I come from Lombard. It's at the top of the list. The point of this is that it's not the rich towns, it's not the poor towns, it's not the rich people, it's not the poor people, it's not the blacks, the Hispanics, it's not the whites. It's every town in DuPage County. It's every socioeconomic group, and it's every age. There is no hot spot in DuPage County where you're going to find these problems. 2013, where we were going along in 2013, about the same as we were in 2012. We got about, in January, we had 4 deaths, so that's about 1 a week. But you can see that in July, there were 11 heroin deaths in July, and there were 18 total drug deaths. So we had 7 other drug deaths that were not heroin related. 18 total. We had a body a day coming into the morgue from July 4th weekend on. And that just obviously shook us all up. We've been out talking as much as we can before that and after that. I don't know for sure if all this talking and ruckus that we've created about this is what caused that great decrease in deaths going into December. I hope it's true. I hope that we are getting out to the community and getting people to understand how deadly this disease is. In 2013, the other thing I wanted to point out really quickly is that if you look at the teenagers, we had 5 teenagers in 2013, 15 to 19. We had 2 20-year-olds and 2 21-year-olds. So that means we had 9 people that weren't legally able to drink die of heroin overdose in DuPage County last year. And these are the towns. Again, the towns changed. There isn't a hot spot. It is all of our towns. We need to be careful about this in our whole community. Took a quick look at all of the toxicology. When we do an autopsy or when we evaluate this, we do a test with 350 different tests, and we find these opiate drugs in the system. But also it's important, antidepressants. There are 11 of the 38 people had antidepressants in their system. They're not taking that because it was getting them high. They're taking it because mental illness and drug addiction are very closely correlated. And these are people that were on antidepressants because they were being treated for that disease by a medical doctor. Also important, you can see that amphetamines and cocaine, the drugs that make you stimulated, are not really common in this system. It doesn't make sense to take cocaine when you're taking an opiate because they do opposite things to your body. And the last thing on the bottom, we had about a third of the people were drinking at the same time too. So there was not one person that had one drug in their system. It's a poly-drug thing. You're either drinking, doing some cannabis, doing some different drugs, and that type of thing. So that was our experience. I'm happy to answer any questions later, but I thank you for your time and your concentration. It's really wonderful that your principal and your leaders in your community have opened this forum up. Thank you for your time. I forgot to tell you, we are now going to have our state's attorney, Bob Berlin, talk about his aspect of it as the state's attorney handles the criminality aspect of it and drug court and such.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for coming out here tonight to learn a little bit about what's going on in our community. When I came to DuPage County in 2004, I could count the number of possession of heroin cases that we had. They were less than 5. And to give you some idea of where we've come, just a year ago, we had 66 cocaine cases pending and 57 heroin. So it was about 35% of our possession cases were heroin. Just this past January, that 35% jumped to 41%. We had 84 heroin cases pending and only 68 cocaine. I say only 68 because heroin has now surpassed all other drugs as the most prevalent felony possession case that we see in this county. So what are we doing about it as far as prosecution? There's really two avenues. There's addicts and there's drug dealers, and we treat them very differently. Starting with the drug dealers, the laws have changed in Illinois. Just a couple of years ago, the amount required for a non-probationable offense when you're selling heroin was reduced from 5 grams to 3, which gave us a great tool. And then just a year ago, the General Assembly gave us the state version of the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization law, or state RICO law. We used that statute 6 months ago and charged our first RICO case, which involved 31 defendants in a drug trafficking organization. And they were trafficking in heroin throughout Cook and DuPage County. This drug trafficking organization, to give you some idea of how lucrative heroin is, was bringing in between $2,500 and $3,000 a day in heroin sales. And there are, unfortunately, more of these organizations out there. But these kinds of cases involve multiple jurisdictions and a lot of resources and manpower. But that's what we're committed to doing, is going after the drug dealers. When we talk about drug users, it's a far different story. And what we've learned over the years is that treatment is a more effective alternative than incarceration. But treatment only works when people want the treatment. If they're going into our drug court, which is where they get the treatment, if they're going in there just to avoid the penitentiary and they're not committed to it, they're not going to succeed. But for those defendants who do want treatment, we've actually done very well. Since 2002, we've had over 600 defendants enter DuPage County's drug court. Our graduation rate is just over 48%. And we now have two tracks. We have a track for those defendants who have serious criminal histories, and we have a track for those who don't. And for those defendants, there's a step increase, a matrix, if you will, of sanctions short of the penitentiary, so that if they mess up, they're not automatically going to the penitentiary. Because when we're talking about heroin, we see a greater incidence of relapse than any other drug. And the drug court is set up to allow for a number of relapses. And those are met with graduated sanctions. Over 60% of our defendants in our drug court are addicted to one or more drugs, but over 60% of those people are addicted to heroin. And that is really an astronomical, incredible number. So when we talk about drug court, we're talking about $3,000 to $5,000 a year for treatment. When we send defendants to the Illinois Department of Corrections, it's about $23,000 a year. When we're talking about drug possession, there's a turnaround in Department of Corrections usually in less than a year's time. And what we found over the years is those defendants go down, they come back out, they're still addicted, and nothing has changed, but we've expended all of these resources. So that is a great alternative for many defendants who are charged with drug possession, and that's what we're doing with those defendants. Many of these cases that are successful, these defendants that come out of drug court are able to get their charges reduced to misdemeanors or, in certain cases, an outright dismissal. We are not about ruining young people's lives with felony convictions if it can be avoided when we're talking about drug addiction. The problem becomes if that addiction is not treated, as Dr. Jorgensen mentioned earlier, these defendants will then steal, they'll break into homes, they'll break into cars to support their habit. And when that happens, then it becomes too late. Then there is no drug court, and it becomes a public safety issue, and we have to deal with those cases accordingly. The good news is that we are making progress, not only with our drug court, but we have a mental health court, because as we found, many defendants don't just have a drug addiction, but there's also a mental health component that goes with it, and we try and treat what's ever causing that illness or that addiction. So that's some of what we're doing here in the county. There's one other law I did want to mention, which is the overdose immunity law. It went into effect 2 years ago. That allows for immunity for people who call the paramedics or call the police because somebody is experiencing a drug overdose. Anything 3 grams or less that the police find as a result of responding to that overdose, you have immunity for. It encourages people to call the police and call for help when they're with someone who is experiencing a drug overdose. We were trying to avoid the situation of friends driving someone to the emergency room and literally throwing them out of the car and taking off for fear that they would be arrested and prosecuted. There is progress being made, but this is a public health crisis as well as a law enforcement issue. And what I ask all of you to do tonight when you leave here is please spread the word. Tell your friends, tell other family members, tell people in your community what you learned here tonight and spread the word. And go to the county's website, www.heroindupage.org, where there is a wealth of information about what we're talking about here tonight, where to go, where to seek help. And I'm now going to turn it over to Sergeant Randy Groh from the Sheriff's Office. Thank you.
I've been with the Sheriff's Office for 18 years, and starting at the Sheriff's Office, I guess I was so naive to it, to the drug world. I had never done drugs. I had never been a part of even drinking. I still haven't drank to this day. But getting into this job and now being a parent, it is such an eye-opening experience for me to, as a street cop, to investigate it, but to see the devastating effects that happen throughout our county. To see families get ripped apart, to see the extent that kids go through to get the drug, it is such a terrible thing. I guess the understanding of what this drug is doing to them and how cheap it is, and this euphoric feeling, or the understanding from a medical perspective of how it's just taking that pain away from your body. For me to witness that and to see that and investigate it, and then look at that devastation throughout the county, it was such an eye-opening experience to me. Within my job, even when I was started off, my very first call on my own, I was being shadowed, was a heroin overdose. And, just from my very early career to now, as seeing that rise and seeing that change, I'm so thankful that everybody is here to discuss this difficult topic, but to understand that it is here. It is in our communities. And, the Sheriff's Office is very proactive, and we try to do everything that we can to involve, to have school officers. We have a school officer assigned here to this school, and we have other officers that go out and through our community, teaching Too Good for Drugs, and trying to get that education and that awareness out there, which is so critical. It's so critical as us as a community, and as for understanding of how this affects everybody. Kids stealing and pawning everything. I've witnessed it from a personal level, from my niece being addicted to drugs and pawning off my deceased mother's wedding ring. These programs that we try and put out there, we need to encourage everybody to be involved in. We have an anonymous crime tip program through the Sheriff's Office that we encourage you to visit. If you have information, right on our Sheriff's Office website. The program is called ACT, which stands for Anonymous Crime Tip. But we want the community to act to get us the information so that we can help stop the dealers or the users. But Sheriff Zaruba has promoted so many programs, one of which we'll hear about here shortly, called the First Step Program, which in such a personal way, it allows parents and addicts to try and resolve that issue without law enforcement involvement. These other programs that we try and encourage people to get involved with and understand about, just like this forum, or communicating with our office and just telling us what is going on in your community. We have a Citizens Police Academy that we invite everybody to come into to learn about our office. And that is just to open the door for communication. We want that communication with our community. We want that involvement. We want everybody to come together to understand. Now, at the sheriff's office, just recently, we have been able to train all of our street deputies to handle or deal with, as a first responder, if they're dealing with an overdose like I did early in my career. I didn't have this medication, I guess is what's called, Narcan. Now, all of our officers, all of our deputies are trained in using this injection, which is actually a nasal injection. And thankfully, under the sheriff's direction, we have this now on the street. And just exactly 1 month ago, I believe it was on March 22nd, we had our first life save from that injection. And the deputy was awarded a life-saving award for saving that life. And I mean, that is such a wonderful thing. It's a nasal injection that goes along with emergency rescue breathing, and it makes an immediate response to counteracting this drug. And the importance of finding somebody that is on an overdose is getting there and calling us immediately. Now, when we have arrived, just like I arrived at my first heroin overdose, getting there, the area was cleaned up. The stuff was hidden. But we need to know that when we respond. We need to know if there's a potential that it is a heroin overdose so that we can act appropriately. We don't want you to fear that you could possibly be prosecuted or your child could be prosecuted. We want you to give us that information so that we can act appropriately and give the proper medication to save that life, which happened, which is so fantastic. I applaud Matt Lagona, who is here tonight, to speak of his journey that he went through with his addiction. And we are now going to be able to hear from Matt directly, to hear about what he went through and where he is at in his journey on recovery. So I'd like to welcome Matt up to the stage.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt. I'm a recovering addict. I broke my knee in a ski accident just about 3 months ago. So I'm still on these crutches. Anyway, thank you for allowing me to speak here tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity. I feel like I like change teams. I'm working with the positive aspects of this disease now, and it wasn't always that way. You know, I battled heroin addiction and drug addiction for a long time. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there right now in the audience thinking, you know, that will never happen to me. That would never happen to my son. That would never happen to my daughter. And I'm sure that's what my parents thought. You know, I grew up in Addison. I had two outstanding parents, two great loving parents with two sisters. I'm a middle child, only son. So I was like this, always put up real high on this pedestal, and always given everything I ever wanted in my life. I had a great life, you know. I wasn't, you know. It was just great. I can't really go into anything more about it. It was fantastic. The one thing I'll tell you is I always enjoyed, like, you know, just partying pretty hard as a young adult in high school, and it started off with, you know, marijuana and alcohol. You know, and then probably like my junior year of high school, which was 2001, I was introduced to painkillers. You know, and for me it was something that I could take and go to work. It was something that I can take and go to school. It was something I can take and go to a family gathering. You know, it didn't change or alter my appearance at all. So I can get high, you know, on these pills, and I can go to anywhere I wanted, and nobody would ever know. So a lot of my other friends partied with them, and they're very, very accessible. I'm sure they still are today, but they were everywhere. The thing is, I never stopped. I never stopped. I took it through high school, out of high school, and I continued using painkillers, Vicodin, OxyContin, and stuff like that. And I was able to maintain that for a long, long time. I went into a family business that were my grandfather, my father, and now myself. I'm third generation. And I guess I was able to maintain because of my parents. They made me functional, made sure all my stuff got done, and I was able to just maintain this addiction and hide it pretty well too. When I was 23 years old, my mom passed away. She was real suddenly. She had a heart attack, and that was it. That was it for me. I went to what I knew best, and that was alcohol and drugs. It was painkillers, and I immediately began stopped being functional. I wasn't able to maintain anymore. I wasn't able to go to work and pay my bills and stuff like that. So I ran out of money pretty quick. I'll just say that. And a friend of mine, a very, very, very good friend of mine, introduced me to heroin. I was sick one day, like some of these gentlemen explained it to you. When I would get sick, it would be it took my mind, body, and soul. I guess that's the best way I could describe it to you. I would do anything to get what I needed. So my friend introduced me to heroin, and I never went back to anything else. From there on out, it was heroin all the time. Just like these guys said, it was 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That was my job, to stay high. And destruction. It's the best way I could describe it. I was destruction. Everywhere around me was just total destruction. I've been to 2 treatment centers. I went to one in Rockford. I was there for 30 days. I came back. I came out, and I used alcohol, and I think they mentioned it in here. One of these gentlemen mentioned other mood-altering substances, other mind-altering substances. I went back to alcohol, and I immediately used heroin again. It's if it's not one, it's another. That's the kind of addiction that I have. So I relapsed on heroin again, and that it got worse, just like everybody said it would, and I lost more, and I lost more friends, and I lost more money, and I lost more stuff, and I went to another treatment center in California. I was there for 110 days, and that's where I was introduced to a program, a 12-step program, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got to go to it, and I got to see that there's a hope in these people's eyes, and they introduced me all around, and it was great. It was great. I came back here from California, and I wasn't done. I stayed sober for 18 months or something like that, and I used again. And this last time I was arrested, I was charged with felony drug possession, and I was thinking when you guys were talking, I was in drug court. I graduated drug court some years ago. I was given an opportunity. And it was for me, it was a game changer. I don't want to minimize what drug court did for me. It was a great tool in my sobriety, and I never had one sanction. I never had one problem. It was either go to jail or get clean and sober or die, and that's really where I was at with it. I was very, very sick, and I was very, very tired. My family needed me, and I was just tired of it. So I took all the suggestions, and I jumped through all the hoops, and I did every single thing that was asked of me, including go to meetings. That was it. I was surrounded myself by people that wanted what I wanted, and that was to live a different life, to live a sober and happy life. I just dove into it head first, and I've never looked back. This February, I celebrated 5 years. Clean and sober, 5 years. I'm going to talk about the program that I got sober in for a few minutes. It's Alcoholics Anonymous. I chose that because it was suggested to me, and I battled with that for a long, long time about the alcoholism or drug addiction. What's the difference? What's that? And I just chose Alcoholics Anonymous because that's where I started going, and that's where I felt comfortable, and that's where the people that welcome me the most. So I worked these steps, and I got a sponsor, and I listened to what he told me, and I got involved. I couldn't imagine in my wildest dreams 5 years ago or 6 years ago standing up on a stage like this talking to you guys. It's a real miracle. But the friends that I associate myself with today are people in the program. My whole life is surrounded by it. I had a broken knee, and I didn't take any pain medication throughout the whole thing because I was so concerned that it would bring me back to what I do. What else to tell you guys? Now I'm just trying to give back what was given to me, and that's sobriety. I meet people every single day that come in, and some of them make it and some of them don't. And that was me for a long time, so I could relate to it. And I see kids, young kids, I just turned 30, but I see younger kids coming in all the time, all the time. Kids under 20, kids under 18 even, and it scares me. It scares me because I know what it took for me, and I know how hard it was. And it was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life, and I know that it's possible, but it's very, very hard, So I commend the people that like you guys that are up here, giving these presentations, and with that, I guess that's all I have to say.
Okay, I'd like to introduce the director of our crime lab, Claire Dragovich.
Good evening. My name is Claire Dragovich. I'm the director of the DuPage County Crime Lab of the DuPage County Sheriff's Office. I've worked there just over 17 years, and I have served as a forensic drug chemist. So I have seen a lot of different drugs that have been taken in DuPage County. The mission of the crime lab is to support any law enforcement agency in DuPage County by working their cases. However, we have a program that is quite unique, that is a service to the community, and that is our First Step program. The First Step program allows parents and guardians of juveniles residing in DuPage County, if they think that they have found drugs on their child, they can call us and arrange to submit it for us to test. The purpose of this is to give the parent or guardian information that will allow them to make the first step in hopefully addressing the issue with their child. This is a free and anonymous service. We never want your name. We don't want your phone number. The way it works, you call the lab and we get some information from you, and we advise you on how to package whatever you may have found to bring it to the lab. We give you a control number, so if you're involved in a traffic stop, we can verify you are coming to the crime lab. Once it gets to the lab, if we have availability to work it straight away, we shall. If we don't, we'll give you our business card with our phone number and a time you can call us back, because we don't need to know who you are. We'll analyze it, and when you call, we'll let you know what it may have been. Over the years, we have seen many different types of samples submitted by parents to include heroin, cocaine, anabolic steroids, LSD, cannabis, cannabis brownies, synthetic cannabinoids, you name it, we see it. In DuPage County, the number one drug that we identify is actually cannabis. And for many, many years, the number two drug, half as many exhibits would be, or even less than half as many exhibits, would actually be cocaine and then heroin. Over the last 2 to 3 years, the number of heroin exhibits that we identify in the lab is almost equal to the number of cannabis exhibits that we identify. It's been a shocking increase that we've seen. So this drug is very real in DuPage County. So to give you an idea of the types of what would look like drugs that, apart from the obvious, heroin is typically packaged, as we see it in the lab, in small little Ziploc bags. They may not even be an inch square. They may be a clear Ziploc. They might have a funky pattern on them, like a stamp of a green alien or an 8-ball stamp, and it will be a powder. Typically off-white, tan, gray. It also can be in a little fold of foil, tiny little square piece of foil, maybe yay big, that's folded up real small into a little fold, maybe yay big. We'll find these in cigarette wrappers, you know, the plastic that's on the outside of a cigarette pack. They'll use that for packaging. Paraphernalia that's associated with heroin includes syringes, that's the real obvious one people know about. Straws, when straws are used to inhale the powder, maybe 2 to 3 inches long, residue on the inside, clearly visible. We also see metal bottle caps that are charred black on the outside and off-white or white on the inside where the heroin has been heated. So if you ever have a concern, if you ever find something, you have the opportunity to call us and we can help you to try and take the first step with your kids. Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Miss Felicia Maselli.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to say to Matt, your mom's not here to say that she's proud of you, and my son's not here to say that to him. So, on behalf of your mom, I'm very proud of you. So I'm standing here as a mom who has suffered the greatest thing a mom can suffer. I'm here to talk about my son Louis and his life. Louis was born in 1988 in a big, large, happy Italian family. Like Matt, we wanted to give him everything, and he was involved in so many activities. We had a really happy childhood. Looking back at it, you know, it's filled with good memories, and there was really no major indicators of what my life was going to, what Louis' life was going to take a turn with. You know, in my home, being Italian, everyone was welcome in my home, and looking back at that, I would change that. I would have been a little more alerted to who was coming into my home and been more of a mama bear, but everyone was welcome in my home, and Louis was so popular that, you know, it was a joy to behold, but it was hard to control who is with and what he was doing all the time. He went to a private high school, Driscoll High School. He did well. He was very popular. He had many, many friends. He played football. He was a state championship football player. He loved sports. He loved girls more, I think. And in playing football, he was introduced to painkillers. The players used to take them on the field, and his brother also had a sports injury where he was overprescribed painkillers, and they were around. And I didn't know how prevalent, but like everyone said here, the painkillers are what started Louis' addiction into heroin. So looking back, I've had open prescriptions in my house. My mother, who was sick, I had her prescriptions open, just not being aware. And then when Louis was in college, he started doing poorly, and a friend of mine said, "Your son's doing heroin." And I remember the first time hearing that word. I just couldn't believe I was saying it, and I still sometimes can't believe that it's part of our normal vocabulary these days. It shouldn't be. But I just was like, heroin, that can't be possible. Because I think looking at y'all, if I was, a parent of a young kid or, a high schooler, I don't think that word would have entered my life either. So if you're sitting here saying that you can't be affected by it, I probably would have been thinking the same thing, but we can no longer afford to have that attitude with this drug anymore. So Louis was in college and was not doing so well and came home and found out he was doing heroin. We put him in rehab, and the first one was 30 days, and he came home, and as I find out, 30 days is not a cure for a lifelong disease, and it is a disease, and it's nothing, it's recognized by the American Medical Association as a disease. So, I stand here as a proud mother. I would not be embarrassed or ashamed if my children had diabetes. So I will not be shamed or silenced, nor anyone should with an addiction. So I sidetrack. He relapsed, and we put him into a rehab center that is called Teen Challenge, and he was gone for 4 months. And 1 month after he came home, I got the call that no mother should ever get to come home. And I saw police and ambulances, and his brother found him. My son was gone in our home. And the world lost a beautiful, beautiful soul. And I knew at that point that something had to be done about this. If this could happen to this sweet, wonderful, kind boy, this could happen to anyone. And I wanted to honor his memory. So I gathered some friends and family and said, I want to do something. And we started a foundation called LTM, Heroin and Support Foundation. It's not just for parents. We've been in front of over, as Bob Berlin and Mr. Jorgensen could probably state, over 100,000 people right now talking about my sons. I have one in recovery. We're talking about my son Louis' life. And, there are some things that I look back at and kind of wish I had the benefit of knowledge of having at my fingertips. Louis was a risk taker, and he liked just, doing crazy things. And I think that's related, as I'm finding out, to dopamine levels. So if your kid's a risk taker, just keep an eye on it. Dopamine can be released by achieving goals and normal goals, even by achieving a new level on a video game. So if your child seems to be a high-risk taker, that's something you might want to just keep looking at and talk to somebody about. If your child suffers from anxiety and depression, being a teenager, you think that's normal, but, to actually help them with their coping mechanisms, and it's not always normal. Louis, suffered from depression and was on an antidepressant. I didn't know that would be a predictable factor in him becoming an addict. If your child is socially isolated, that also could be, when they take a drug or alcohol, that relieves them from that anxiety of being socially isolated and make them feel normal in social situations. Also, my father was an alcoholic, and knowing that addiction is hereditary and that Louis would have a 50% more chance of becoming an addict is something I wasn't aware of. And also, if you can prevent your child from abstaining from drinking and drugging till they're 19, they have a 70% more chance, a greater chance of not developing an addiction. That is a large percentage. Also, you know, when my boys were in their late teens, I kind of thought my job was done. They were really good kids, got good grades. I thought drinking and drugging was a rite of passage as long as it was within reason on the weekends with their friends who all seem socially to be doing well. I would have definitely paid way more attention to that. And it doesn't have to be a rite of passage. Not every kid has to drink. And you know, if we keep them involved in so many other things, drinking and drugging is not the only thing to do on weekends, but you know, it seems to be the norm, and I think as as parents, we keep a really good eye on that, and that does not have to be the norm. Also, when they were in their late teens, I kind of thought, even college, like, okay, you know, I did a good job. They're pretty much on their own, even though I was paying for their car insurance, their phone, their car, sometimes helping them with money. But I stopped checking to see who they were with, what time they came home, what state they were in. I went to bed before that. I would definitely would have loved to have the opportunity to change that. I would definitely, taken their car away or see who was on their phone and be a bigger spy. Look through their drawers. They're in your house. They have no rights. I don't think they should. I would have been the biggest spy ever, and checked who they called and. Check to see if where they're going is still where they're saying they're going. I just had a lot of confidence in my kids, and I would definitely change that. I still think a curfew, for people in their late teens, they might not like it, but it's still a really good idea. You still are their parent. You're not their friend. You never should be. Your kids have a lot of friends. You need to be a parent. And they might not like it, but they will thank you later. I want to read a poem, and it's, "Hello, my name is Heroin. Hello, my name is Heroin. I destroy homes, tear families apart, take your children, and that's just the start. I'm more costly than diamonds, more costly than gold. The sorrow I bring is a sight to behold. And if you need me, remember I'm easily found. I live all around you, in schools and in town. I live with the rich, I live with the poor. I live down the street and maybe next door. My power is awesome. Try me, you'll see. But if you do, you may never break free. Just try me once and I'll own your soul. When I possess you, you'll steal and you'll lie. You'll do what you have just to get high. The crimes you commit for my narcotic charms will be worth the pleasure you feel in your arms. You'll lie to your mother, you'll steal from your dad. When you see their tears, you should feel sad. But you forget your morals and how you were raised. I'll be your conscience, I'll teach you my ways. I take kids from parents and parents from kids. I turn people from God and separate friends. I take everything from you, your looks and your pride. I will be with you always, right by your side. You'll give up everything, your family, your home, your friends, your money, then you'll be alone. I'll take and I'll take till you have nothing more to give. When I'm finished with you, you'll be lucky to live. If you try me, be warned, this is no game. If given the chance, I'll drive you insane. I'll ravish your body, I'll control your mind. I'll own you completely, your soul will be mine. The nightmares I give you while lying in bed, the voices you'll hear from inside your head, the sweats, the shakes, the visions you'll see, I want you to know these are all gifts from me. But then it's too late, and you'll know in your heart that you are mine, and we shall not part. You'll regret that you tried me, they always do, but you came to me, not I to you. You know this would happen, many times you were told, but you challenged my power and chose to be bold. You could have said no and just walked away. If you could live that day over, now what would you say? I will be your master. You will be my slave. I'll even go with you when you go to your grave. Now that you met me, what will you do? Will you try me or not? It's all up to you. I can bring you more money than words can tell. Come take my hand. Let me lead you to hell. So with that, I just want to end saying that, Louis, you did not die in vain, and you will not be forgotten. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here. Whether you have been personally affected, or someone you know has been affected, or you're just here to learn a little bit, as I am as well, we appreciate you for taking time out of your evening to be here and show your support. Thank you to Matt for being here and sharing your story. Especially thank you to Mr. Maselli, and we're so sorry for your loss. Several months ago, Sergeant Groh came up to me and he said, I have an idea. What do you think about opening up your school to the community and bringing everybody in and talking a little bit about heroin in the community? And I said, heroin in our community? What are you talking about? There's no heroin in Glenbard South. There's no heroin in Glenbard. I'm not following you here. And it doesn't happen here. And I can tell you for a fact it does happen here. And not only can I tell you at Glenbard South it's happening, I think these people have proven that it is in our community, and it is something we need to be aware of. As I prepared for tonight, I put on my dad cap. I've got younger kids, but I put on my dad cap and I said, my kids are going to go to Wheaton schools, or they're in Wheaton schools. They're going to be in high school soon. And I said, what is Wheaton going to do? What is Wheaton doing to combat this stuff? And so I put my dad cap on. I said, what is Glenbard doing to combat this in our schools? How are they helping our kids? I can give you some of the clubs and I can give you some of the things that we are doing. But I'm telling you, it's a scary thing that we talk about daily. We do random drug searches, random locker searches. We bring the dogs into the building. And we just did a dog search last week. We brought in 3 different dogs. They search for bombs. They search for drugs. We have a reciprocal reporting agreement, which is wonderful, with the DuPage County Sheriff's Office. And what that means is that anything that happens in our community, they share with us. Anything that happens in our building, we share with them. We have a DuPage County Sheriff's Officer that works in our building named Deputy Hood. She's not a school security officer. She is a DuPage County Sheriff. We have school counselors that are available that listen to kids. It's part of our health curriculum to inform kids about drug awareness. We have a code of conduct that we hold our athletes to. And I know that is separate than our general student body, but with over half of our students involved in athletics, we think that that's very, very important to target that group. We also know by having this kind of program in our athletic department, it does discourage kids from going to parties in the athletic season because it holds them to a higher level. We have a Glen Ellen Youth Council that promotes safe events. We have a safe post-prom events that is happening in all 4 of our buildings. We've now had for 5 years now an insomnia event that happens at Glenbard South that has been put together by actually former Glenbard parents. And a special thank you to Ann Bouchard and Cindy Christensen for putting that program together. And that is, again, a partnership, so when kids leave prom, we're promoting that healthy choice as they leave that event. We partner with local mental health institutes to provide services for our kids, so they share information with us and we share information with them so that our kids get better service and better care. We've got this wonderful thing that's called the Glenbard Parent Series. I'm sure most of you have been to some of the events. And that's funded by some of the Goodman Foundation. And that partners with our Students for Students groups. And they bring us the ability to give healthy choice alternatives to our kids. And it promotes that healthy choice. It also helped funded some of our Live Life Well Week speakers, including recently we had Chris Heron. I don't know if you recognize that name. He's a former Boston Celtic, and he is as well now a recovering heroin addict. We have this amazing group called Natural Helpers. These are students that are selected by our school staff that are just naturally gifted at helping kids. And these are kids that are a little bit sneaky. They're in the hallway, and they're not there to be informants, but they're in the hallway to help kids through difficult situations, and They have that wonderful relationship with not only students, but staff to be able to report back that there might be a student in crisis. And obviously, we're doing these kind of events. In addition to this event, way in the back, we are streaming this event. And I find that to be very important because although we have a rather light crowd here tonight, it is our hope that when you leave here, if nothing more, you sit back in your chair and you say, I got to let somebody know about what's going on. I've got to inform people in my community. I got to talk to my next door neighbor when we're barbecuing and I see him outside, that people need to pay attention to what's going on in our communities. Again, I want to thank you all for being here. This is our first attempt at doing this in our Glenbard communities, and I really appreciate you coming out tonight. I would last like to introduce Chief of Police Phil Norton to come up here with some closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've heard some great information tonight. What I'd like to say is, first, I love the criminal justice system. I do. I love the people who work in the criminal justice system. And I can tell you with great confidence that some of the people you heard tonight are the top in their field in the criminal justice system. I've known Sheriff Zaruba for over 20 years. I've known Bob Berlin since he's been around. I've heard of his reputation from Cook County before he even came here. And I know Dr. Jorgensen. We've worked together, the three of us, four of us, have worked together on a number of cases, not just involving drugs, but I know these men to be the most professional there are in their field. They're here tonight with a really important message. The tragedy tonight is that for you in the audience, you're halfway there because you're here tonight. You're here because you're concerned and you want to know and you want to hear the message, and you can spread it when you leave. But the people we really need to reach are the people who aren't in the empty seats tonight. The people who aren't in the empty seats tonight may not be paying close enough attention to what's going on at home. My eldest daughter, I have 4 children. My eldest daughter, some of you, I see some familiar faces. Some of you know her. She is a graduate of Glenbard South and University of Illinois. We thought she was going to be a nun. For a while, it looked like she was going to be a nun. She was considering it. She was a great kid, really good kid, never got in trouble. When she started going out with friends, when she reached that teenage year where she started going out with friends, the rules were, when you come home, you're going to wake me up if you have to, give me a kiss goodnight, whatever, and I might ask you to blow in my face. And as the daughter of a police chief, she was like, Dad, I'm not going to do anything. I'm St. Mary kind of a thing. But you do that for 2 reasons. One, kids need to know you're paying attention. Kids need to know you're checking on them and you care. And you do that so her brothers and sisters see it too. And they know that their time is coming where you're going to check on them. It's critically important that you check on them, that you know what's going on. Ms. Maselli mentioned something earlier in her talk, her very touching talk, about paying attention in your kids' rooms. I think if the state's attorney was up here, he would tragically tell you of some cases where parents allow their kids to put locks on their bedroom doors. We know personally from law enforcement that sometimes when we go to a house because of trouble, a parent will tell us, we can't go in, Johnny has privacy and we can't go in his room, we don't do anything. You need to go into your kids' rooms. You need to look around. You need to snoop. Look in the garbage. Look in the drawers. Look under the mattress. Put their laundry away. Vacuum the floor. Do something to get in there and be a part of your kid's life and know what they're doing. It's through efforts like that that you'll be able to discern whether or not you have someone who might be in trouble in your own home or a neighbor. You might be able to talk to a neighbor who's not here tonight and say, this is what you should be doing. And if you do discover something, you heard some great programs being put on by the sheriff's office and the crime lab that you can get help at. If you find these things, what is this? Could this be drugs? All parents want to believe their kids. It's natural. We see it all the time. We are susceptible to it ourselves. You have a child who might be acting a little aberrantly, and you want to believe them. They're your kid. You want to, when they say, oh, it's not my alcohol. Oh, that's not my marijuana. Johnny put that in my backpack. That's not my heroin. You have to assume they're not telling you the truth. It's very difficult to do as a parent. But you need to do it so we can stop some of the tragedies that we've heard of tonight. On behalf of the people who were here tonight and speaking, I want to thank you all for coming out. I'm honored to be here with as part of this panel. And while we won't be accepting questions, I don't think from the floor, we will all be around for a few minutes afterwards. If you have any questions, please feel free to step down and join us. Thank you very much.